so I think it's about time to get going. So I'm going to say hello. I'm not staying on video the whole time. I just wanted to say hello to everybody, and I hope everybody is well and surviving our slightly crazy times at the moment, but it's nice to have you all on a call. We've got a lot to get through today. So I'm going to start off and do the first part. Now hopefully you can all see the slides. This is the agenda for the day. We've got quick update on membership and the initiatives, and then the change control board. Joe Amalia is going to present on that. Fran's going to do a quick TMF reference model turns 10, and I've sort of given a hint by what's bandied about over my head. And then Russell and Scott are going to be presenting on real world studies, and then, and with the whole team actually. And then we're going to have, Mary Christine is going to present on the CTTI meeting about ICHE 6L3. And then we're going to wrap it up with some events and some meetings. If anybody's got any questions or comments, then please put them in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get back to you. If anybody hasn't had a notification, it might be worth just making sure that you are registered as a subscriber, and it also might be worth talking to your IT to make sure that you can get through. Okay, so membership. So this group just keeps growing. We've got 4 new project team members. So that's the people that are actively involved in projects at the moment. And we've got over 1,000 mailing list subscribers. Now, the mailing list subscribers are the ones that should be getting the notifications, and the project team members as well. But that's how we should be getting things through to everybody that way. We have lots of discussions going on. Please, guys, one thing I would ask is if you see a question come through, do go in and answer it. I've seen a few questions recently where people haven't been answered. It would be nice if everyone could get their answers. And the LinkedIn group still grows. It's got 3,000 members. And what's interesting, of course, is a lot of us are now using the TMFReferenceModel.com to put our conversations in, but LinkedIn is still very much a strong group of people. If anybody hasn't joined, don't forget TMFReferenceModel.com/join. In terms of the active initiatives, we have the sub-artifact group, which has been going for a while, but we've actually, this is a superset of sub-artifacts, and we're getting rid of the alternative name column, and it's gone to the change control board. So we're in discussions at the moment as to how we're going to be moving this forward. We have the device group. I don't actually have an update on the device group. I don't know if there's anybody on the call today who is part of the device group who could give me an update. Nope. Okay. But that I know was nearing completion. Real world studies I'm not even going to be talking about because everyone's going to be talking about it today. There's the email group. Jamie, do you want to just give a 2-second update on where we are with the email group?
Hey,
sure.
I'm from the device group.
Oh,
it's Joanne.
Oh, Joanne, hi. How are you?
It took me a long time to unmute.
No
We're
worries.
still working on the ISO. I apologize. I'm like trying to find my name to unmute. We're working on the ISO. We're trying to get to the end of that. We've gone back and forth on the QC. So we're trying to get to the end of that, and I have a plan. I'm hoping to be done with that within the next couple of weeks.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
Karen, I apologize. And I've gone back and forth a few times. I did send an email. We can't get into the DIA Zoom message. So I've been using my own. So if anybody is trying to get in to the Zoom calls, please, please, please email me and I'll send you the link that we've been using because we can't use the one that's in the calendar.
That's very strange. Okay, well maybe we can have a talk about that after. It should be okay.
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 I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you, everyone.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, Jamie, back to you to just update on the email group.
Sure. So we have a final master document for the guidance for the management of email communications and clinical studies. It will be going to steering committee today for the second and final review, and we hope to publish sometime early July.
Excellent. So then we can present it at, hopefully you can present it at the next meeting on the 27th of July. Fabulous. And I don't think there's any particular update on JGCP, is there?
There is not. The last when I checked in with that group, they were working with the Japan Manufacturing Association to review the TMF reference model. And I believe they had no changes, but I will get a final confirmation from them and send that to the steering committee.
Fantastic. And exchange mechanism, I didn't actually have a specific update for the exchange mechanism. I know Paul isn't on the call today. Is there anything specific that should be said about the exchange mechanism from anybody?
This is Ken. I can say
one. Oh, hi, Ken.
Yeah, hi. Paul Fenton and Elvin Thalen and I are developing a survey. We really need to discover more about what companies, how they view adoption, what is needed to really get companies to adopt the exchange mechanism standard. So we haven't set a date for it yet, but we're moving along. Should see it within the next couple of months. Fantastic.
Thanks, Ken. Much appreciated. So that, I think, wraps up my update. So Joanne, can I hand over to you? And I've done my video bit for the day. Feel free to share your video if you'd like to, Joanne. You don't have to. But if you could update on the change control board charter, that'd be much appreciated.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. And for everyone who may not be aware, the change control board does exist. And I'll just go through the charter real quick. This is our project structure. It's not really an org chart like a, who reports to who, but we do work with all of the zone groups as part of our work. So if a request comes in, we evaluate it and send it to the proper zone for their feedback and recommendation and thoughts. We also work with the working groups as they do their work. And then we evaluate all of the requested changes and send our recommendations up to the steering committee for their review and approval. The next slide, Karen. Okay, the change control board does have a number of subject matter experts. We try not to also sit on the zone teams, and the group is headed by Kelly Robinson and myself. We do not sit on the steering committee, but we do have two steering committee members who liaise with us to provide us with the latest and greatest as to what's going on with the steering committee. We do have two procedural documents that we follow. We have our own process, and we also have a version control policy from the steering committee. So we use that as we're evaluating our changes, but also as we get things ready for a new version. So we try to follow those policies to make sure that what we send out to everybody is in alignment with what we've agreed. The next slide. Okay, we typically meet on a monthly basis to look at the new changes that have been submitted and to see if we've received any feedback from the various zones. We use that meeting time to actually make decisions on the new artifacts, to see if we have any redundant ones or even changes as time progresses. We sometimes need to update a definition or a description of what that actual artifact is. So we use that time to make those decisions. And then we also use it to make recommendations to the steering committee. And we do categorize those changes into major, minor, or maintenance. Let's see, and we do look at things from the working groups, but only things that affect the structure of the TMF reference model. If it doesn't affect the structure, we don't really look at it. And then it is our job to prepare the release notes and any guidance on how to implement the the new changes. And the next slide. And the CCB does play an essential and a critical role in this whole process because we're basically an unbiased group of subject matter experts, and we're independent of the steering committee. We're not voted into office. This is a volunteer job, and we really do try to make good recommendations to the steering committee so that it reduces the burden on the steering committee, and hopefully we can get these changes through in a quicker fashion. Let's see, and we are aligned with the steering committee though, so that since we do have members from the steering committee who sit on the change control board, they provide that oversight and give us input as to the current thinking of the steering committee. And this does provide some opportunities for others to get involved, and it's not a big time commitment. So if you are interested, Karen, the next slide. We are currently looking for new members. We would like people who work in the TMF area. While we do appreciate those who support the TMF, we really find that having people who are intimate and really, you know, rolling up their sleeves and getting into the fun of the TMF is what we really need. So we're looking for people who may have 3 to 5 years of experience with the TMF. Now, not to say if you don't have that, don't apply, but we do want people who understand the reference model and have used it for a while to help us move these changes forward. And it would be a plus if we could get people from the sponsor or even CRO companies, because they often use the reference model in a slightly different way. And of course, you must like Too Much Fun. Karen?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that was your last slide, wasn't it, Joanne?
Yes, it is.
Brilliant. So, guys, there are 90-something people on this call. I'm sure some of you have got some thoughts about how you could help with the TMF. The TMF reference model has absolutely, as you're going to hear from Fran in a bit about, you know, how we, you know, where we came from and what we got to. We've been built on people donating their time and donating their effort. We really, really need help for the change control board. So if anybody wants to be involved, just email me. If you've got Joanne's email address, great. But if not, just email me, kroy@flexglobal.com, PHLEXglobal.com, and volunteer. One of the things that was a question, Joanne, is whether you have anybody with device expertise, specifically US device expertise, on the change control board.
At this point in time, we don't, but we would love to have some.
Okay, so maybe to the device group, if there's anybody there who fancies joining.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane, I know you asked the question, but I'm not, so I don't know if we're going to be able to have expertise from the change control board coming to you as a device group. And also, one of the things when we pass over to Stuart to talk about real world studies, we'd obviously want to have somebody from there join the change control board as well, because I think that's something that would benefit. So please think about it. It's not a huge amount of time. Please do volunteer. We need you guys to help it, and just think you'll be helping control and manage this model that's changed our life so much. So thank you very much, Joanne, much appreciated. Okay, so moving on, Fran.
So we had a chance to celebrate the model that's changed our lives so much at the DIA virtual annual meeting. It was my pleasure to panel a distinguished group of TMF Too Much Fun colleagues, including Karen, Jamie, and Dave. We went through a journey of TMF reference model information, the TMF survey, and details about inspection readiness. So we dug into the course definition an overview of the TMF reference model, plus some excellent insight about where the model's going in the next 10 years. Dave ably presented some wonderful survey detail, and Jamie dug into a lot of great information on TMF inspection readiness. We recorded the session for the annual and had great fun doing it. It was wonderful for all of us to have the background of the celebrating our decade-long journey. It's hard to imagine 10 years ago. I don't think we could have ever foreseen things like the Change Control Board or the Exchange Mechanism Standard, or our success in running the survey over the years, or the growth of the model as we all know and celebrate. So here's to another 10 years of wonderfulness, and hope to see you all at DIA or a TMF meeting soon.
Hold on. Thank you very much, Fran. That's much appreciated. And we did have great fun, I have to say. It was a good laugh. So do go and watch the session if you have. I think if you can get access, then absolutely. Okay, so now let's get into one of the serious deliverables. And Stuart, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm afraid I have to move the slides, so just tell me when you want me to go to the next slide. And I know the one thing you wanted to start off with was a poll, but would you like to do a bit of an introduction?
I will indeed. Thanks, Karen. So I am Stuart, otherwise known as Scott to a lot of people. It is actually, you're welcome. It's actually a pleasure to be able to announce the launch, communicate the launch of the Real World Study Document Index. This has been something that has caused a lot of happiness and a lot of pain over the last 2 years. So if we move on to the poll, as Karen was talking about. So we have a question that just gives us a bit of context. So is your organization currently conducting real-world studies such as non-interventional studies, natural history studies, etc.?
And you'll notice I had a bit of artistic license in the questions because I actually thought it would be quite interesting to see the difference between the sponsor and the CRO.
I like the demographics here, yeah, it's very interesting.
All right, so I can tell you now that we have 56% have voted. It's still coming in quick, so just hang on a sec. It's probably 63% of the people have voted. I'm going to cut it off in 2 seconds.
Okay.
Right, I'm going to cut it off.
No.
Now. Right, hold on a second. I've got to share the results. There you are. I can't see, so hopefully you guys can see the results. Tell me if you can't see them.
Very interesting. So yes, the response is 45%. Yes, CROs, 17%. No, but we do run these trials, 22%. We don't run these trials, 16%. So a very interesting split there. So over 50% that run these trials between sponsors and CROs.
So definitely something worth needed then. Let me go back to the slides for you. So you should be seeing the slides now, is that correct?
Yeah, so if you can move on to the next slide.
Yep.
So that highlights why there is a need for what we're calling the Real World Study Document Index. Why would we need it? So if we think about it, the TMF reference model was designed for clinical trials. And the question is, what if your clinical study isn't a clinical trial? So for those 50+% of people that run these types of studies and use the reference model, you'll know that over 40% of the artifacts aren't relevant. And what that tends to mean is you need to, as it were, reinvent the wheel or start from the beginning with every study, which involves extra effort documenting what isn't relevant. And you'll often find that you're penalized in audits for missing documents. And let's be honest, these were documents that you never had because it wasn't a clinical trial. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And complement to the 21st Century Cures Act and everything that has come after that from 2016, we do know that there is an increasing need for what we call regulatory grade real-world evidence. And this, in turn, is driving our need for a robust and credible TMF document index for these types of studies, these real-world studies. So that's the why. Next slide. So this is the how. You know, how did we go about this? So in March of 2018, and it really has taken us over 2 years, as a working group, we got together and we were real-world study experts in various fields. And what we were aiming to do was develop a TMF framework for real-world studies that was based on the TMF reference model. And why would we do that? Well, obviously because it's long established, it's widely adopted, and it's widely accepted. And also what we wanted to do was remain as consistent as possible with the format and structure of the TMF reference model. And the scope, clinical studies that are not clinical trials. So these kind of clinical studies that cause pain. And what we did is we based this on prospective study designs so that this would provide maximum coverage of the potential documents and artifact types that you would find across this range of studies. These would be from retrospective chart reviews all the way over to prospective product registries. Next slide. This slide helps to illustrate the differences between the standard, what we're calling the standard TMF model, and the real-world study document index. Let's look at the artifacts. We have 130 artifacts versus 249. Only 11 of those are core, and 119 are recommended. So you can see where the challenge has come for those that run these types of studies trying to implement the standard model when they aren't running clinical trials. We've also tweaked the terminology so that a trial is a study, subjects are patients, etc. Next slide. And back a slide. What I wanted to illustrate here, thanks Karen. What I wanted to illustrate here is the core definition. So you'll see that this is significantly different to GCP. So for a core artifact with the real-world study document index, this is an artifact that is created or collected for an applicable real-world study as dictated by local regulations, local guidance, contractual obligations, or, as we've said here, considered essential based on the consensus of the real-world study document index working group. So what you're seeing here is an acknowledgement of the lack of harmonization of the regulations for these types of studies, and that's where generally the pain points come in. Next slide. What we're not doing is belaboring the point with the slide deck, because first and foremost, you actually have to see the document index to be able to appreciate it and then to be able to review it and comment on it. So our next steps are to publish it, for you to peer review it, and then for it to be modified accordingly. What I want to do is shout out to the Real World Study Document Index team here, just quickly, and they are Jeff Kirsch, Kath Firth, Linda Rudolph, Russell Joyce, Shelley Brigstock, and Tara Isherwood. And honestly, we had a lot of fun doing this, but our tears were not just fun. There was a lot of tears based on pain over the last 2 years. It's been a great time. It's a shame that it's coming to an end, but I know it's just the start of something new. Next slide is our next poll question, or not.
No, it is. I need to launch it. Hold on 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
And bear in mind, this is not a reflection of my presentation skills. This is just about the document index. So how likely is it that your organization will use the real-world study document index? And I would caveat that based on the fact that it is based on the clinical trial master file reference model. So we have very likely, fairly likely, not likely, never, not applicable, we don't run these trials.
And I had to put the not applicable, we don't run trials in, because there's quite a lot of vendors and consultants and people on here who just don't run trials. So
I would have added point 6 that would have said, and based on your presentation, absolutely not.
I could have done that. Okay, hang on a second. We've got 61%, a couple more people to vote.
Okay. And I would say, while you're waiting for the votes to come in, the reason why we created this was because of the pain that it was causing us every time to reinvent the wheel. This is a great time to launch this, given that it's 10-year anniversary of the clinical trial reference model. And it just is a nod to the fact of these things are evolving.
Right, I'm going to end the polling now so that you can see the results.
So very likely versus and fairly likely. So you've got 69%, not likely 18%, never 2%, not applicable, we don't run these 11%. So we've got, a strong 29%, a moderate 40%, but again, that's a very good and a very strong indication of the relevance of this.
Absolutely. We do have a question that's come in, Stuart, related specifically to the model, and the question is, which model would be used for the US PAS, or post-approval studies? So would you suggest somebody uses the TMF reference? Where do they fit into the real-world studies category versus the sort of standard clinical trials?
Well, I would ask, it's a question within a question. So you've got a post-approval study. Is it a post-marketing commitment? Is it a post-marketing requirement? And is it still within your IND? And the reason you would ask those questions is what you're asking then is it still within the governance of the FDA and therefore still under the 21 CFR series?
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Feel free to come off mute, or if you for some reason can't get yourself off mute, just shout and I'll take you off mute. Or else, if you don't want to actually say it, you can always put the question into the chat. I have one question that I'm curious as to how people are going to manage, and that's where people are running both types of studies. So they're running sort of run-of-the-mill clinical trials using the TMF reference model, and then they're going to be running some real-world studies as well. And I wonder whether people are going to implement sort of effectively a new structure in their paper or eTMF, probably E, I'm guessing, or whether people are just going to use the structure that's already there and just annotate where things aren't relevant. And I don't know whether you as a group discuss that at all, Stuart, because I think if you just run real world studies, it's very simple, but I think if you're running a mixture, and the same thing would apply to devices as well. Did you talk about that at all?
I can. I would open up that to Kath if she can unmute herself.
Kath, are you okay unmuting yourself, or it's Kath first? Let me just.
Yes, sorry,
Yes.
that took rather a long time to unmute myself.
No
Sorry,
worries.
afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I couldn't get it to unmute. Sorry, could you just repeat what you'd like me to help with?
Yes, what I'm
question?
curious about, Kath, is obviously, well, a company like GSK, you run a lot of I say normal, I don't mean the word normal. You run a lot of standard clinical trials with, IP, et cetera, according to and I know you've implemented the reference model, which is great.
Yeah.
But when you have real world studies running alongside, how are you managing it? Are you implementing a new structure effectively for your real world studies, or are you applying the principles of the real world studies index and sort of adapting your current model?
Okay, so we have a number of studies. They might be real world studies, but they don't actually fall into the TMF SOP that we currently have running at GSK. So we have some that are fully in TMF, and they are adopting principles there, and they are mandated to follow things there. We also have an EDL in inverted commas that we have put together to really guide those studies that fall outside of the TMF. So we've got that going, and we're we've also obviously had membership on this group who have been looking at this model. So we have a set of studies within GSK that are absolutely crying out for a model like this, because a TMF model is too much for them. It just doesn't work. It's sort of squeezing something through a set of artifacts that really don't apply. So we've been sitting in this sort of interim position, I guess, or this waiting pattern for quite a long time, trying really to paste together EDLs that we found from TMF and a study documents list that we've put together ourselves to help sort of with the data integrity and the document integrity. So there is a gap.
Okay, and so you're going to be, for these other studies, you're going to be specifically just following the new index.
Yeah, we will do. Our studies will fall clearly within one or the other model.
Okay.
And that's where we're hoping to move towards.
I think it's also worth noting, Karen, that the RWS document index is just a subset of the standard TMF reference model. So it should be instantly familiar to anybody. It's just that you have less there in terms of artifacts.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what I found fascinating, I must admit, is the amount of literature around real world studies, especially through this pandemic time. I mean, FDA has been coming out with guidance, and there's just and when we started talking about it as a steering committee in reviewing the documents, there were a number of people on the steering committee who were getting into real world studies and going, okay, we don't quite know what to do because we don't know the documents. So it's really appreciated.
Yeah. And that's, all the EDLs that we've created have been based on the TMF model originally. Those that we've been using, whilst we're trying to sort of shore up this gap, have always come down from that perspective, I think. But it'd be very nice to have something that we could really use.
Absolutely. Does anybody have...
And it helps to build processes as well, so.
So I've got a specific question, which is around how there's somebody's specific eTMF is set up to reference model version 3 and how you can add the model to that. I think for specific TMF systems, what you need to do is actually go back to your TMF vendor and ask them how they would set it up, because I think a lot of vendors are going to have to manage this differently. So my suggestion for Rita for you is actually go back to your vendor and say, right, now we'd like to add this model. How are you going to do it? As I said, different vendors will do it in different ways. So I think that's probably the best thing.
I would absolutely agree with that. And we've had to do that internally with different EDLs that we've tried to implement for some of the different study types. That we've gone back to the vendor and said, like, how do we do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people will handle things very differently. So anybody else got any other questions? So I'd like to just say thank you very much to all of you guys. I know it's been a lot of work. Russell, thank you very much for keeping us all informed, and Stuart, thank you very much for driving the group forward, and to everybody else on the group, thank you. And we will get formal notification out and get it available on the website, hopefully within the week. We'll have the slides up. The slides will be available, by the way, anybody who is interested, the slides will be available on the TMF Reference Model website.
And can I just add my thanks to everybody on the group, actually, because they really are the experts, and it's them that have input completely free of charge, their expertise, their knowledge and their experience to make this all happen. And I think they've done a terrific job. It's, as Stuart said, it has been fun. We've enjoyed it. It's a shame it's come to an end, but we'll keep plodding on. I'm sure there'll be some modifications we'll need to make moving forward, and we want to keep it fresh for the future anyway. So we will still be meeting, but it's been terrific. Thank you.
And one last comment, we'd love one of you to be on the change control board, because I think Joanne and Kelly would absolutely appreciate your expertise. So maybe you could get together and see if there's somebody that could be on the change control board, but I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much. Okie dokes. So let's moving on. How are we doing for time? Perfect. So I'm going to hand it over to Mary Christine to talk about the CTTI stakeholder engagement session that a few of us attended. I don't know if anybody else on the chat attended. If you did, might be worth letting us know. And if there's anything to add, then feel free. So, Marie-Christine, over to you.
Yes. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. So we thought that it would be good to give you a little bit of, or sharing actually information from this actually engagement session. So if you move to the next slide, Karen, please.
Oops.
So let's maybe first to kind of, tell you what CCTI is. So it's Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative. It's actually a multi-stakeholder organization that is public-private partnership, and was co-founded by Duke University and FDA. So pretty actually interesting and impressive type of organization that has the following mission: to develop and drive adoption of practices that will increase the quality and efficiency of clinical trials. So we are a lot of us actually from the steering committee have attended those sessions, and we wanted to share what was presented, discussed during those 2-day session. Okay, so who participated and what was discussed? So first, it was actually the ICH expert working group itself, and who actually invited different stakeholders, including clinical investigators, patient organizations, and we were actually invited to attend, but also discussed, everything about ICH E6R3, and provide input and insight to the expert working group, which actually is tasked with the significant and very important critical task to revise ICH E6 in order to integrate advances in clinical trial design and conduct and make it more agile and inclusive. So next slide. So one thing that I think is of note during those 2 days or different sessions is I think the survey that CTTI conducted, and that has, you see here the number of participants, the number of countries that have been involved, Europe, Asia, US, we're represented. Input and responses came from pharma, CROs, and academy. And what actually came out of that survey is that the sections that you see here about investigator and sponsor apparently needs the most of updating in ICH E6, and under the the sponsor section, monitoring came really on the top of the areas that would need the most significant actually revision. And another feedback or takeaway message that is pretty important is actually the fact that the working group is looking at updating, and it's work in progress actually, the principles that are in section 2 of E6, and in particular in those areas that are mentioned in the screenshot on the right hand side of the slide. So it's about implementing systems that assure quality, it's about care, it's about confidentiality and privacy, informed consent, information documentation and storage. All right, so those 5 principles are also the ones that where actually most significant revision is expected. Next slide. So let's get into a little bit more details and to kind of give you a flavor of the key themes for revision. So first and foremost, it's really about modernization, renovation, total rewriting of E6. So E6 R3 will not look like or anything like, E6 R2 as the way we know it. It's all about flexibility and simplification. Flexibility not necessarily meaning, hey, you can do, whatever you want, for providing that you follow those 7 principles, right? It's not that. It's really more about being more specific on what is required for which type of research, right? But also clarifying what is optional based on a particular study. So it's all kind of building that flexibility by being more specific and by bringing clarification to actually accommodate under that framework the different types of research studies or clinical trials, etc., that can actually follow the same framework and operate and being operated under the same framework. So it's really about providing a framework for all types of studies, including their geographical location. So like, for example, I mean, lower and middle income countries, which is very important to take into consideration during, I mean, as part of the revision of E6. And it's also about removing complexity whenever it's possible, especially for investigators. And we've heard that very loud and clear from the investigator side about, you know, the fact that everything is becoming so complex that it's almost like say, oh, wait a minute. I mean, what are you asking us? Right. So that's a big theme. The next one here is about, you know, the specific updates to be incorporated, such as the new designs, like the master protocols, but also the new technologies that are being used, and more we see that. So there's definitely a need, and it's been accelerated due to COVID in terms of e-consent, e-pro, remote monitoring, telemedicine, direct to patient, etc. So all of that has to be reflected and has to have its own framework within E6. So if you move to the next slide, there's more themes for revision, such as aligning with ICH E8. Very, very important. We just had revision 1 of E8, and definitely there needs to be a strong alignment and cross-references from E6 to E8 and other relevant guidelines, such as Q9. There's a need also to clarify terms and concepts, right? I mean, like, you know, those things that are actually defined in E8, such as critical to quality factors or quality management using risk-based approach, the quality tolerance limits, all those concepts have to really be clearly defined so that everybody really understands, okay, so in my organization, in my company, for the type of studies that I do, how do I actually implement that? And there's also a need for clarity on sponsor and investigator allocation of responsibilities, and it's all about monitoring investigator staff, resources, etc. So if you move to the next one, there's more. So, I mean, specifically the protocol section of V6, it's, well, what we've heard is that there's clearly a need for guidance to make protocols simpler and more feasible, but also incorporate the new protocol designs. And in section 8, which is kind of close and dear to our heart, it's to actually revisit the concept of essential documents, clarify certified copies. All those areas were actually, you know, we're still struggling, including terms and definitions, and you know, a need to actually look at the existing regulations so that this section records and records management became really more meaningful and more clear for companies. And last but not least, clearly alignment with regulators on expectations. So there's a lot more to that. It's just a high-level summary, and in a minute you'll see where to find additional information. So if you move to the next slide. So what is the approach to the revision? So I mentioned modernization, total rewrite. So the overall kind of concept or approach for the rewrite of E6 is to actually have overarching principles that apply across the board, and then 2 annexes. One for the traditional interventional clinical trials, which would be Annex 1, and Annex 2 which would include considerations for non-traditional interventional clinical trials. So the question here is, what does that mean? So it's going to be very interesting to see how it evolves and how they define non-traditional interventional clinical trials. Okay, so next. The next slide is to give you an idea of, the different steps in the ICH process, but also give you some ideas about the time frame. So we are kind of right there. We are at step one, and just collecting information, gathering information. The different groups are, like the EFPA or pharma and the different sponsors. I mean, everybody is kind of trying to put their ideas together and also try to influence as much as possible. So the time frame for step 1 and 2 for the principles in Annex 1 is around 24 months, and for Annex 2, 12 to 18 months. So Annex 2 will come after the principles in Annex 1. However, it's going to be very important to clearly understand what's going to be under the principles and Annex 1, especially when it comes to the protocol design. Okay, so, and then clearly, I mean, you have step 1, step 2, which is the sign off by the ICH assembly, and then step 2B, where we actually get the sign off by regulators on the draft document and their public consultation. And finally, step 4, and it's the adoption. And step 5 is the full implementation and coming into force in each of the regions. So long way to go. However, it's happening now. So I think that everyone should actually take the time to look at, ICH 6 the way it is now. Look at clinical trials the way they are conducted now, all the new technologies that have been introduced over the last year or so, and really think, okay, so what is it that we want ICH 6 to be moving forward? If you move to the next slide. So I said that there's more information out there that is available. So here it is, you have the links, and I would certainly encourage everybody to take the time to read through. One thing that I can mention is that the working group is already working on the principles, and they have totally redefined that section 2 of E6 and defined 7 principles in which they actually start putting some text and wording to frame each of those principles. All right, so that's all what I wanted to share. Back to you, Karen.
Well, thanks, Marie-Christine. That's great. I have to say, I found it fascinating, and I think it's interesting that they're having such a major rewrite. Having done R2 not that long, what doesn't seem that long ago. I mean, they really seem to be getting feedback from everybody. But there's a question that's come up, which is actually quite an interesting question. Do you remember, Marie-Christine, if there was anything mentioned about devices and whether E6R3 will clarify device requirements, or whether there's an ICH ISO 14155, and that's not me knowing that, that's Jane knowing that, by the way, should be used instead. 14155. Should be used for devices. I don't remember any specific device discussion.
No, I don't think there was anything around devices. I know for a fact that they talked a lot about the non-drug studies, the real-world studies, or real-world evidence. I mean, using data from real-world, etc. I mean, all of that, yes, but not the device.
So it might actually be worth for the device group, because you can go and you can leave comments and it might be worth actually raising a comment and feeding back to us if there's anything further from it, because as I said, I don't remember anything about devices.
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic. Has anyone got any questions? As I said, the slides will all be available. It was actually really interesting to listen to, and they got lots of different people. So they had all sorts of different people from different health authorities,
Yes.
giving their views and their comments, and they came at it from very different angles. Some of them were saying how they thought it should improve, and others were saying what they thought was missing, and others were just commenting on how they approached trials. So it was fascinating.
Right. I mean, one thing that I've heard and at several times actually, and read also in the information that is available out there, is there's a need apparently to actually really involve more the patient organizations in the protocol design or clinical trial design to get their voice heard at a very early stage of the clinical trial design, which is really interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Patient, definitely getting everybody involved, isn't it? So
yes.
Any other questions from anybody? Nope. Okay, so let's carry on. I always wonder, whenever we put this agenda together, we always say we've either got too much or too little, and every time we come in about spot on, which it just surprises me, because you do think that, you know, there's no way you're going to have. I thought today we might have had a bit too much, but we've done it perfectly. So just to round off, for those of you who are still feeling that you're not seeing anybody, well, unfortunately, there's still a lot of things that are changing in terms of conferences and things. The clinical document world in the early September is definitely virtual. For those of you who are wondering about the TMF Summit, I've had a conversation with Fierce Life, Quest X, EXL, whatever you want to call them now, and it's still tentatively going to be in London, but obviously that all depends on the rules and also whether people can travel. I'm absolutely convinced it will be virtual as well. And I know that these guys have done they did a virtual clinical trial conference, so I know they've got quite a bit of experience with it. There's one in New Jersey, which is going to be the Electronic Trial Master File Forum, and I think that's supposedly going to be in person and virtual, but again, we don't know obviously what's going to be changing. AGXP in San Antonio in Texas, down as a conference, and for those of you who were looking forward to going to Bruges in September, you're now having to go to Bruges in April 2021. For those who've never been to Bruges, it's a beautiful city, definitely worth a visit. So that's the IQPC, TMF and GCP inspection. If anyone's got any other conferences they know of, ping us and we'll add them to the list. They're all on the TMF Reference Model website. That's where you will also find the next meeting. It's where you'll find copies of these slides, and I promised to get them to you quicker this time. I kept emailing them and they didn't actually make it. So we'll get them to you definitely, and you can get, that's where, and thank you for the people that have volunteered so far to be on Change Control Board. I believe we have 4 new people, so thank you very, very much. Anybody else who wants to be involved, please email me, email Joanne, and let's get the group growing. And the next meeting is the 27th of July, so add that to your diary. We don't, as you know, we don't no longer distribute an Outlook request because it crashed my email completely. But it's from go to the TMF Reference Model, go to the home page, and you can download it there. And you'll also get notifications through groups.io. And just a reminder for those of you who haven't joined, that's where you register and you put all the details. And that brings us to the end of the presentation with 2 minutes to spare, which I love. That's where the meeting can be found. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much to all the presenters. Everybody, please take care, look after yourselves, and we will see you on the 27th of July.
All right.
And I'll start my video to say bye, everybody.
Bye, Karen. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Karen.
Lovely to see you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.